When a man realizes that the bizarre events of his life are actually the plot of a best-selling novel, he must confront the reality-warping consequences of fiction becoming his truth. This is a story about a man named Harold Crick and his wristwatch. That's the first thing we hear from this narrator with a British accent, as the camera zooms into the now beeping wristwatch. The narrator goes on telling us about Harold, who's been woken up by the alarm. She says Harold is a man of infinite numbers, endless calculations, and remarkably few words, and his wristwatch said even less. After she says all this, you won't believe what we see next. The inside of his teeth as he brushes. Why oh why? She's now telling us how Harold would brush each of his 32 teeth 76 times every weekday for 12 years. 38 back and forth, 38 up and down. Every weekday for 12 years. He would knot his tie a certain way, run at a certain speed, review a certain number of files as a senior agent for the IRS, take a specific amount of time for his lunch break and coffee break. Apparently he's something of a human calculator, and the guys at the office make sure to use him. Who wouldn't? It would also appear that his watch has thoughts and opinions. But remember, it doesn't say much, so we don't hear from it very often. But that watch was Harold's best friend, because just like me, this guy has no friends. Actually, I think I'm better than him, because at least I have some friends on Call of Duty. He just has his wristwatch. Well, and one guy, Dave, who we'll soon meet. He would go to bed at 11:13 every night, and place his best friend to rest on the nightstand beside him. But the narrator now says that was before Wednesday, when Harold's wristwatch changed everything. Then we briefly see a boy who just got gifted a bike by his dad, and then a woman looking for a job in the papers. Now we see Harold brushing again. Something isn't right on this particular Wednesday. He seems to be hearing voices in his head. Say hello to Randy Harold Orton, you guys. Oh, wait a minute. It's actually the voice of the narrator he's hearing. It's freaking him out and absolutely ruining his day. He misses his bus. He's really distracted at work. And even when his human calculator skills are called upon, he falters. He confides in his one and only human friend, Dave. He tells him he's being followed by a woman's voice. Harold tries to get Dave to hear the voice, but of course he can't hear a thing. Harold can't get any work done because of this voice. He heads to a bakery which has been defaulting on their taxes, and the lady there, Anna, is giving him a really hard time. She's making some good points about why she doesn't and won't pay her taxes. But hey, if the feds are listening, I am not showing any support to her. I do pay my taxes. I mean, I will when I manage to stop being poor. But Anna here seems to just not be interested in paying her complete taxes. But allow me to digress a little. The look in Anna's eyes, man. I can bet my last $5 that these two will end up falling in love. And the cat did not even stay in the bag for too long. Before I could even go borrow $5 for this bet, the narrator in Harold's head gives him away. He's fantasizing about Anna, imagining her in all kinds of sussy situations. He's in love already. Deep, deep in love. This is a woman he's supposed to be auditing. How the heck is he going to manage that? She even catches him staring at her. Man, Harold is totally not his usual robot self today. He leaves the bakery and is shouting to the heavens in the middle of the road. And there's a woman, Karen Eiffel, standing at the top of a tall building overlooking everything going on beneath while taking a smoke. And beneath, we see a man watering some plants, and the boy who just got a new bike from his dad rides past and causes the man to spray water on the job hunting lady. Karen looks depressed. Trust me, I know what that looks like. I said it. She just self-deleted. Ah, so sad. But we don't see her land. Instead, we see her in her office, standing on her table with her hands spread out, as they were when she was atop the building. Apparently, all that top of the building stuff was going on in her head. Relatable. A lady named Penny Escher comes in and breaks up her party, jerking her back to reality. Apparently, Penny is the assistant that just got hired, and from their first conversation, we find out that Karen has writer's block. Karen asks Penny what she thinks about leaping off a building, and Penny just point blank tells her she doesn't think of leaping off a building. Karen, on the other hand, thinks a little too much about it, because she seems to know too much about this topic. She finally just blurts out, "I don't know how to kill Harold Crick." Okay, wait a minute. Harold is only a character in this woman's novel. Oh wow. Karen says, as much as she would love to, she can't just simply throw Harold off a building. Penny now steps in and tells her she has been an assistant for 11 years and has helped more than 20 offices complete more than 35 books and has never missed a deadline, nor has she gone back to ask for more time. She tells Karen that she will gladly and quietly help her clap Harold, and boom, we see Harold in front of his computer, typing when he gets a message from Kaylee from Human Resources. Kaylee is asking him what's going on, and Harold just says everything is fine. Of course, Kaylee doesn't believe that, so he tells Harold to take a vacation. Not a couple days off work, a vacation. Oh, to have Harold's job. But instead of Harold jumping on this offer, he says he'll think about it. What's there to think about? When someone offers you a vacation, you take it. Simple as. Anyway, Harold is now at the bus stop when this watch starts going crazy. Apparently it's trying to tell him something, but he doesn't even know. Harold has hardly paid attention to his watch apart from using it to tell time, and that lack of attention has now driven the watch crazy. So now, after displaying some craziness, it has decided to stop. Harold asks one of the men at the bus stop for the time, and says his watch to that time. Take a mental note of this. The narrator then says something about this seemingly innocuous act, resulting in his imminent death, and Harold says what? He doesn't just say what. He starts shouting to the heavens, saying hello and asking why, when, and all that. He gets home and is still asking questions. He engages in different activities to get the voice to talk again, but she's radio silent. She has really made Harold crazy because he's absolutely destroying stuff in his room, doing the narration himself. Still nothing. No Randy Orton this time. He goes to see a shrink the next day and she tells him what he's describing as schizophrenia. He says it's not. The voice isn't really speaking to him. It's just speaking about him. He's a part of his story. But now his problem is that the voice comes and goes. Like there's some parts of the story he's not being told. He wants to find out what those parts are before it's too late, and he ends up being late. After hearing all this, the the doctor insists more confidently that he's a schizophrenic. Harold insists back and says it's not. I'm no psychologist, but I'll go with Harold. Cause why not? Anyway, her recommendations are take medication or go see someone who knows about literature. Of course, you know what option he picks. He's now sharing his story with Professor Jules Hilbert, a literature expert. They go into the toilet and this professor's drinking coffee while he pees. Garbage in, garbage out, I guess. From this conversation, we find out that Harold was once engaged, but the lady left him, and also that he believes the voice in his head. Professor Hilbert says he can't help him. He's an expert in literature theory, not in crazy, but he has one recommendation for him. Keep a journal. I mean, it is pretty good life advice. Harold says he can't remember everything. He only remembers that one sentence. Little did he know that this simple, seemingly innocuous act would lead to his imminent death. That catches Hilbert's attention. He says he has written papers, taught classes, and given seminars on little did he know. He tells Harold that little did he know means that there's something he doesn't know. So he tells him to come back Friday, but he says nah, Harold could be dead by Friday. So they schedule a meeting for tomorrow. Harold is now on the bus, and as the voice starts the narration, he takes out a pen and paper and starts journaling. As he's doing that, Anna enters the bus, but she doesn't really want to be around him. She'd rather stand than sit beside him. But once the bus starts moving, she's pushed to a seat, and they get talking. He straight up apologizes for the last time, and she accepts his apology, but only because he stammered. He makes small talk with her and gets too excited that he leaves the bus 27 blocks too early. Now he has to walk. The next day, he goes to meet the professor who has devised a test, which will help them uncover more truths about the narrator in Harold's head. He asks him some pretty ridiculous questions, and Harold doesn't understand why. Hilbert says the only way to determine what story he's in is to determine what stories he's not in. 200 IQ move. Anyway, as Hilbert gets back to his ridiculous line of questioning, we see Karen driving on a bridge in the rain. The little boy with the new bike just enters the road without looking, and it causes her to swerve and head straight into the water. By the way, the job hunting lady now has a job as a bus driver, and she just witnessed all this. But of course, this is only going on in Karen's head. She's actually just sitting with Penny, telling her that they're imagining car wrecks. Penny wonders why they can't imagine car wrecks inside. I mean, look at Karen. She's literally freezing, but she'd rather stay here and imagine. Back to Harold, and the professor asks him if he's ever had some ambition. Harold says he's always wanted his life to be more musical. He's always wanted to learn to play the guitar. Now Hilbert says the next step is to find out if the story he's in is a tragedy or a comedy. He says most comic heroes fall in love with people who are introduced after the story has begun, usually people who hate the hero initially. Honestly, the only thing that was left was for him to mention Anna's full government name. Harold mentions Anna to the professor, and he tells him to try and develop that, so we straight away see Harold entering the bakery. He has two columns drawn out in his little diary, one for comedy and the other for tragedy, and he just puts strokes under each column at random. When she notices the diary, he closes it and they head to auditing. She brings out a box of what looks like rubbish, but those are actually her tax files. She says she's actually fastidious, but she put the files in the box just like this just to screw with him. Now listen boys, when she starts taking her time to carefully map out ways to annoy you, know you're halfway there. Harold quickly gets to work though, while Anna ignores his entire existence. Relatable. At night, when he's ready to leave, he walks downstairs and tells Anna he's done for the day. She asks him if he wants a cookie. I don't know if that was literal or figurative, but Harold says he doesn't like cookies, and she just asks him what's wrong with him. Yeah, for real, what's wrong with you? Who the heck doesn't like cookies? She takes that as a challenge, serves him milk and a piece of cookie, and tells him to eat it. He's sitting there asking to be set free, and she's standing there like his mother, instructing him to dip the cookie in the milk and eat it. When she gave that instruction, he knew he had no other option but to do as she says. He eats, and you can see a new sense of his unlock in real time. They get talking while she goes to bring him more cookies, and we find out that she was at Harvard Law but didn't finish. She barely got in anyway. But well, it was at Harvard that she started baking. She and her classmate would participate in study sessions, and she'd bake and bring treats to the study sessions, and people loved them. More people started coming to the study sessions because of her cookies, and she started looking for better recipes to keep the people happy. Of course, the number of her study group members went up, but her grades went the opposite way, so she dropped down to focus on baking. Harold thanks her for forcing him to eat the cookies. She says she's glad he likes them. There's a little quiet moment there, so Harold breaks the awkward silence by saying he has to leave. She tells him to take the rest of the cookies home, but he says it constitutes a gift, and so he shouldn't. You know, being her auditor and all. He offers to buy them, and that just kills her whole vibe. She tells him to go home. Harold now figures out that she actually baked those cookies for him, trying to be nice, but he just blew it. One more strike for tragedy. Tragedy is winning. The next day, he's in a locker room with Hilbert telling him what happened last night, and Hilbert has a eureka moment. He says it seems Harold himself is perpetuating the story, since the voice seems to be dependent on actions he takes. He tells him to do nothing henceforth, even forget about Anna. Harold says Anna and numbers are all he thinks about, but Hilbert tells him to do nothing if he wants to stay alive. Cancel work, stay home all day, don't answer the phone, don't even wash up. Let's see if the plot continues. And that he does. Nothing. He doesn't even get up from the chair. He pees in a bottle, doesn't touch their TV remote, doesn't answer the phone, doesn't pick up the mail. He just sits there watching TV all day. Literally me. Then suddenly his watch starts going crazy, and boom, a crane comes into his living room and takes his TV. What just happened, right? Apparently these guys have the wrong address. They're supposed to be demolishing another house, not this one. Harold immediately goes to meet Hilbert. He was hoping the professor would say it was just a bad coincidence, but Hilbert tells him that this is part of the crazy plot. At this point, he just straight up tells Harold that he doesn't control his own fate. He tells him the narrator might actually clap him, so he might as well go ahead and just live his life. He might not have much longer. longer, so go live the life you always wanted. I don't know, sounds like good advice to me. And where does that lead Harold? To the bakery? No. Well, yes. The bakery, but he doesn't go in. He looks at the bakery from across the road and just heads over to Dave's house instead, where he'll now be staying. He asks Dave what he'd do if he knew he was going to die soon. Dave says he'd go to space camp. He always wanted to go since he was 9. Harold says he's too old to go to space camp. And Dave says you're never too old to go to space camp. The next day, Harold heads to a guitar shop and the voice in his head is back again, analyzing each of the guitars he's looking at. He finally sees one he connects with, and I know because the narrator says it. While that connection is being made, we see Karen and Penny in a hospital still trying to figure out how to kill Harold. Nothing is working, and Karen literally asks a nurse to show her to the dying people, the people who are not going to make it. Penny is doing exactly what I do in this situation, distance myself from the craziness. Back to Harold. The narrator is taking us through how Harold's new guitar is helping him become stronger in who he is. He no longer eats alone, nor does he count brush strokes, count his steps, wear neckties, all that stuff. Instead, he's now living his life, but his journey is still incomplete, according to the narrator, and his wristwatch was not about to let him miss another opportunity. So what does it do? It shines a light on Anna's name on her file, and Harold immediately gets up and runs to her with carefully wrapped flowers. When he tells her they're flowers, she goes speechless. Harold says he knows he has been odd, but he now straight up tells her that he wants her, and that's why he's doing this. He doesn't even care about protocol anymore. She asks him to walk her home and he even invites him. She tells him she thinks she likes him. They're having one heck of a time in her house, and he sees a guitar in her chair. She says she's actually bad at playing. He says he only knows one song. He doesn't want to play it for her at first, but he eventually does. He's strumming and singing, and she's enjoying the performance a little too much, and they end up getting close. Okay, pause there while I put this down in my diary. Learn to play the guitar. Okay, back to the movie. You know what happens, but we're gonna have to skip over it. And the next morning, the narrator is saying that Harold recognizes this as a very significant moment. She's falling in love with him. He rushes straight to Hilbert and tells him it's a comedy. While he's there, he finds out that Hilbert had made a list of writers who could be doing the narration in his head. While Harold goes through the list, Karen pops up on the screen, and Hilbert says she's one of his favorite authors. As she goes on talking, Harold recognizes her voice and says it's her. That's the voice he has been hearing the entire time. Hilbert insists it can't be her. The interview is a decade old, and he just thought that Harold would have mentioned somewhere that the narrator had a British accent. But since Harold insists, Hilbert now breaks the bad news to him. Karen always claps the heroes in her books. No one ever makes it out alive. Harold asks her where he can find her, and Hilbert tells him she's untraceable. He knows because he used to teach a class on her, and even wrote her letters. Hilbert hands Harold one of her books, and he immediately looks at the address of the publisher, and dashes straight there in spite of the professor's protests. Now we see Karen outside a shop seemingly getting inspiration from an apple. Eve would be proud. She then immediately heads back to the office, and tells Penny that she has figured out how to clap Harold. She wrote it down on the bus, and she tells Penny she'll finish up the story today. Now we see Harold arrive at the publishing company asking to speak with Karen. He explains his predicament to the woman over the counter, and she immediately has him kicked out. I mean, who's going to believe that you, a real-life man, are a character in someone's book, and can be killed by the writer, just writing? Harold now heads straight to his office, and he's not in the mood for any of the greetings his colleagues are throwing his way. He goes straight to his cubicle and pulls out Karen's information from his computer. That's probably the only advantage of being the taxman. He runs out of the office and straight to a payphone. As he's trying to make a call, Karen is going wild on her typewriter, and in his head, now something crazy begins to happen. While she types, the phone rang. Her phone rings twice. Penny wants to answer it, but Karen stops her. She can't believe what's happening. She types, the phone rang for a third time, just to be sure. And immediately as she hits the full stop, her phone rings again. Now she runs straight to the phone and answers it. Harold introduces himself as the person she's writing about, and she thinks it's a prank call. She eventually has Harold come over. She seems terrified when she sees him. He looks exactly as she wrote him to be. She's still not over how incredibly strange this is. Harold goes straight to begging her not to clap him. He's hoping she hasn't written it yet. She says she has. She just hasn't typed it. So Penny just comes and hands him the outline to read. He takes it and goes straight to Hilbert. He says he tried to read it, but he couldn't. He asks Hilbert to read it for him and tell him what to do. He says okay. Harold leaves. Now we see job hunting lady resuming another job, and bike boy riding off on his bike, just as Hilbert settles in to begin reading. Harold, however, is on his bed but can't sleep. I wouldn't be able to sleep either, to be honest. The next day he shows up at Hilbert's office bright and early, and what would the professor tell him? Harold, I'm sorry. You have to die. You're a professor of literature and you couldn't find a euphemism for this? Come on. He tells Harold that the novel's a masterpiece, perhaps the most important novel Karen will ever write, but it's only so good because he dies in the end. Harold is not taking this well, and Hilbert just tells him he's going to die at some point anyway, but if he avoids this death, then his death would never be as poetic or as meaningful as if he let Karen's words kill him. Hilbert tells him that this is just like every other tragedy where the hero dies, but the story lives forever. Harold is now on the bus reading the story himself. He surely has missed his stop, but he's determined to finish his book on this bus today. Meanwhile, Karen is lying on her table telling Penny she has clapped 8 people just by writing. She's being really hard on herself now, and thinking back to the different people she has clapped over the years, and how cruel the deaths were. Harold finally finishes the book and runs straight to Karen's office. He meets her outside, and tells her the book was lovely. He loves it, and thinks she should finish it. Next, we see him go into his office on the night which narrator Karen says is the night before his death. He finishes his outstanding audits, makes some calls he had been putting off, and then goes to Anna's house where they watch old movies. They go to bed after talking about random stuff, and the next morning, Harold puts on his wristwatch and leaves. He doesn't forget to leave a kiss on her forehead. He goes to his house, or where it used to be his house, and he's just standing in front of the place the crane destroyed. Then his watch just starts beeping and shining a blue light. As it beeps, Bike Boy and Job Hunting Lady get up and get ready, just as Harold gets ready. As he's walking to the bus stop, Karen is typing and her voice is going on in Harold's head, saying that the time he was given on that Wednesday, 4 weeks prior, was 3 minutes late. And basically, that was what brought him to this point at this particular time, 3 minutes early to the bus stop. Bike Boy is riding towards the bus stop and falls on the road just as the bus is approaching. Harold immediately steps in front of the oncoming bus to rescue the boy, but he isn't able to get out of the way in time, and he gets hit by the bus. The bus, which is driven by the Job Hunting Lady, by the way. As he's lying there, Karen is absolutely freaking out. She cannot get herself to finish writing that Harold was dead. She leaves it at DE, while the people at the bus stop are trying to get Harold to the hospital. Karen now goes to see Professor Hilbert. She drops the book with him and tells him he might be interested in the new ending. What's that new ending? Harold all bandaged up in the hospital with the doctor telling him what he did was brave but stupid. The doctor also tells him that his watch basically saved his life. He severed an artery in his right arm, which would have killed him in a matter of minutes, but a shard of metal from his watch obstructed the artery, stopping the blood loss long enough to keep him alive. And now that shard of watch can't be taken out of him, so he'll forever live with a piece of his watch in him. Wait, isn't this kind of what happened to Iron Man? Anyway, Anna now comes in and showers Harold with kisses. He tells her what happened, and you can see her fall deeper in love with him in real time when she finds out he stepped in front of a moving bus to save a kid. Back at Hilbert's office, he just read the new ending and he thinks it's just okay. Not great, not bad, just okay. He also points out that the end doesn't make sense with the rest of the book. Karen says she's fine with okay, and she'll rewrite the rest of the book. He now asks her why she changed the ending, and she says she just couldn't bear it, especially because Harold knew that he was going to die, and still didn't mind giving himself up. Harold is now being fed Bavarian sugar cookies by Anna, and he feels a lot better, and he's not the only one who feels better. We now see Dave take out a space camp booklet from an envelope with a huge smile on his face. We see Bike Boy arrive at home and jump straight into his dad's arm. We see Job Hunting Lady get a hug from her colleagues. We see Penny drop a pack of nicotine patches for Karen. We see Hilbert jump into a pool. We see quite some stuff actually, but it all ends with Anna drawing a wristwatch on Harold's bandaged wrist. As Karen writes the final words of the book, a wristwatch saved Harold Crick. We have now come to the end of this incredible story of the inseparable bond between Harold, Ben 10, Crick, and his mystical watch. Moral of the story? Death Note with extra steps. Sort of.